Hello and
Yes.
welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I have a very special guest joining us, and you have literally seen her everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, Oprah, literally hundreds of different outlets. She is a journalist, an activist, and the creator of wealthysinglemommy.com, which is the largest single mother community in the world. She's also an author. I don't know where she has time to do all of this stuff, but the name of the book makes me happy. The Kick-Ass Single Mom, which the New York Post named as smart and a must read. And she's also, and this is what we're going to dive into today, because she is the founder of the activist group Moms for Shared Parenting. And this is may sound like a simple title. This opens a whole can of worms. It's the most interesting topic. And in fact, she has spoken on the topic of single motherhood and gender equality, both for Google, so, the worldwide source of all knowledge, as well as at the United Nations. So I am calling this the single most important episode to listen to for both separated parents and their kids. And I want to thank you, Emma Johnson, for joining me today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That is a very warm welcome. I'm very flattered. Thank you, Susan.
Well, I think the work that you have done and are doing here is critically important, and you are at the forefront of a wave that I'm hoping is going to start taking over both the world of divorce, but just the world in general, because we live in a world today of vast gender inequalities in pay, vast differences in how the sexes are treated societally, and we think we're moving forward, but I found the results of your recent survey, which I'll talk about, to be so fascinating, because it shows maybe that we've made some progress, maybe that uh, where we need to go, but there's still a long way to go. So let me just first explain to people. You recently released the results of a survey, and I'll have a link to the survey white paper in the show notes. And it was on single mom income and time sharing, and really that relation. And it seeks to understand the connection between single mothers' income, so mothers who are either, who are raising children in a single parent household. And as that relates to the time sharing with their children's father. And I think this is a very, this is going to be a sensitive topic. This is going to get some people's dander up. But the results of your survey were fascinating. So, let's just start with, what was your top takeaway from the results of your survey? What's the thing that you really noted the most?
Right. So it was, so the number one thing is there's a direct correlation between equality and time sharing and single mom's income. So we know that when moms share parenting time 50-50, the chances of them earning at least $100,000 are 300 times that of moms who have sole 100% time with their kids. So on one hand, that is astonishing because the numbers are so compelling. On the same At the same token, it's completely common sense. It makes absolute sense. And in terms of a general larger conversation that we're having in this country, especially in this moment, in this pandemic, when we're having moms are completely burnt out, they're unemployed, the moms that are working are frontline workers that are at risk. I mean, everything is highlighting how much work moms do, especially when it comes to childcare and balancing. All of this is, it's obvious we don't have great child support care. The correlation between poverty and child support is clear. The correlation between women earning at the very highest echelons of corporate earning and business ownership and childcare, at every single demographic, there is a clear correlation between childcare and women's professional success, however you measure that. But no one's talking about single moms, right?
Right.
And guess what? We have childcare built into our lives in another house that is away from our meetings while we're doing our work and recording podcasts. We have that at our fingertips. Almost all of us, the vast majority of us, have co-parents, right? Or the potential to have co-parents. It is there. So I'm coming at this. So there was this survey. So that's just one major takeaway. And it was very confirming to me because anecdotally, I was seeing this. I have this large, I run a data-driven business and I have millions of data points about single moms. And I have thousands, tens of thousands of anecdotes over the years. I've been doing this for like 9 years. I've been doing the single mom stuff for a long time. And it's just story after story. We're telling the same story. When women had good co-parenting relationships, the more equality, of course, you and I know it's a sliding scale. Not everybody's going to do 1 week on, 1 week off. But the more equality we had, the more women were able to invest in their careers, invest in their earning, start businesses, make side gigs, relax and chill out in between their parenting, go on a date, go out with your girlfriends, go for a hike, take a little trip. All of these things make us better people. They make us better earners. They make us better citizens, and they make us better parents. And they had less conflict. They had less conflict with their kids' dads. So all of this was like, I was fingers crossed that the data was going to play out and support my hypothesis, and it did. So that was extremely exciting. It is extremely exciting because this is not just for those single moms. It's not just for those single moms that have 50-50. This is a message to all of us that why this is better for us. I really believe that single parents, and I will say single moms, single-handedly can be the silver bullet to closing the pay gap. I really believe that because we are not now this tiny percentage of weird, broken homes. This is now the majority of families in this country. The majority of babies born to millennial moms are unmarried moms. Many of them have partners that, are committed partnerships, but statistically, the majority of those families are going to end up in two household families. So we are now the majority of families. We have the majority, and women have the power over the kids. We do. If there is a dispute and a mom goes to you and you take them to court, well, you don't do that anymore, but go to the lawyer, you go to court. Statistically, the moms are going to get the kids majority of time if that's what she wants. Courts are sexist. Our culture is sexist, and both women and men are sexist. We still believe intuitively that children belong with their mothers. And I am passing no judgment about that. I to this day am working through my feelings about that. That's how I started my motherhood. That's how I started my divorce. That's how I started my own co-parenting relationship. I believe those babies belonged with me because I'm a mom. I gave birth. I believe they bonded more with me. I believe dads, I bought into all the stereotypes about the dads or the, secondary parent and the doofus dads. I bought into that unconsciously. And you can laugh, but it is detrimental because when we collectively buy into this, the dads check out. The moms are making their moms are taking care of the kids all the time, and the moms are then also earning all of the money. And it's a lot less. So anyway, so that was the takeaway. It quantified my feelings about this. The other thing that was very important, that was actually very surprising to me, was that the majority of moms that were surveyed, again, it was almost 2,300 single moms, actually want equally shared parenting. They support 50-50 parenting. And that flies in the face of the general narrative about this. There's a lot of activism in this shared parenting movement. It's mostly men that have gone through bad custody situations themselves. And that has colored the movement to suggest that moms, really don't want equality. And my survey played out different numbers. So that was very exciting to me. So to your point, it shows up that things have changed. The world has changed. Women are starting to see the value of 50-50 parenting. I've only talked about why it's great for moms. This is great for kids. I mean, the science is done. Equally shared parenting is absolutely what is best for children, period. There are at least 60 peer-reviewed studies. There are meta surveys of all the experts. It is done. It is done. And it is true when there is high conflict. It is true when the parents do not choose it themselves. There's a narrative that, well, this is really great if you're Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin and you sit down and it's an agreement. No, when a judge tells you, despite your better feelings about, despite what you want, that it's 50-50, it is still what is best for kids. And I mean, look, it's best for economy. It's best for men. It is best for all of us. Just split the child care down the middle, 50-50. It is actually not complicated at all.
No, I think what's complicated about it is it goes to people's identity. And, I was mentioning to you our mutual friend, Kate Anthony. the host of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, recently posted on Instagram about the fact that in order to start closing the gender pay gap, we needed to close the shared parenting gap. And some of the responses that she got on her Facebook page and her Instagram page from women were really vociferously against shared and equal parenting time, and made the point, be it factually true or not, and based on what you just said about the studies, I think it's not true, that children have to be, that they do better when they're with their mothers, that they have to be with their mothers, especially when they are of tender years. Let's use that legal. So if you could address that particular issue, because I think that, it was such a strong reaction that it makes me feel that for at least those people responding, this goes very deep. This goes to a
It
core of
does.
identity.
I think what you hit the nail on the head. It goes into people's identities, and this goes to men and women. This is men and women, I believe, and I've only studied women, but I interact with many men also. We are all victims of this same effed up narrative. And that narrative tells women that we are the superior parent. And as such, by way of birthright, just by biology, and as such, it is our duties to sacrifice our power in the public sphere by way of positions held and money earned, to sacrifice that for the sake of the family. On the flip side of that, fathers are told by the way of their gender that it is their duty to be the breadwinner, that their value and their identity is tied up in breadwinning, and it is their duty to sacrifice their relationship with their children, time with their children, and intimacy in their fatherhoods for the sake of maintaining that identity in the public world. These are just exactly yin and yang. They are completely complementary to each other. So when we start, your work and the work I'm doing and our colleagues, when we start torpedoing that with science, numbers, data,
Yeah.
right? You can't argue facts with emotion. I mean, you can. I mean, we're living in an age where that's very relevant, but it is really cutting to the root of people. And we're asking a lot of them to overcome the conditioning that they've had for their entire lives. The work we're doing is asking them to rip down 30, 40, 50, 60 years of the most primordial understanding of who they are and how the world works, to give room for something new to bloom. And that is a lot. We are asking a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree, but I also do think if we don't start asking that of people, it's not going to change. And unfortunately, it's a self-perpetuating cycle, because when our generation does it, or our parents' generation did this and fell into the stereotypical roles, we are modeling that for the children we are raising, who then go on to perpetuate it and model it for their children, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're never going to see change until people are able to take a deep breath. I think is part of everyone who's listening right now, who's hearing this and is feeling the perhaps, disturbance of changing these deeply ingrained thoughts and beliefs, and hearing the science as you referenced, or the statistics. Because one thing that really popped out at me in your study, in your white paper, and it correlated, I had recently had Molly Hillenbrand on, and her episode was, if I'd only known then when I got divorced what I know now. And that episode jumped to like number 2 on my top list practically overnight. And her biggest takeaway was that she wishes she hadn't fought for every single second, minute, and hour with her children, because it's in those moments when they're with her co-parent, with their father, that she can focus on her business and on recharging her batteries, and is showing her daughters what a strong, successful woman can do. And she says, if only, she said she spent 6-7 months fighting for a parenting plan that ultimately wasn't what she wanted. And it's exactly what you're describing now. You said, I think your study showed that a preponderance of single moms would like a shared equal parenting situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we shame women into doing exactly what Molly did. It is a function of shame. There's a guy that I became friends with who's in the shared parenting movement, and he's a young dad. And he said, went through is still in the middle of a horrible custody battle, and it started off like pretty amicable, and he felt like his ex was being reasonable. And outside of court, one day he's like, "Why are you doing this? You last week you told me what a great dad I was, and we were getting along, and now you're fighting for every minute." And she turned to him and said, "Just think about how bad it would look if I didn't do this."
Oh yeah. That's wow, you just said that and everything just went ding, 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 ding. Because I had a non-custodial mom who came on, Susan Eckstein, who we did an
Mm,
episode. And she is a mom who voluntarily decided in her agreement with her co-parent, with her ex-husband, that her two boys were going to be better off staying in the family home because she just decided that was better. So she is a non-custodial mother. And she said that the societal abuse that she has taken, the shaming that has been done mostly by other women,
sure.
has been really hard to live with. And she was, I thought, very brave to even come on my show and talk about it, because she said not only did she receive a lot of shaming from other women, she received it from herself.
Right. No, I think that is very brave, and it's very important, these script flips like that, right? When we start to hear about the other gender taking on these non-traditional roles, though I would, taking her out of it 100%, but just speaking in the abstract, so I did start this little site, Moms for Shared Parenting, where I can be working out some of these issues around shared parenting specifically, opposed to my main business, which is about single motherhood overall, holistically. And the tagline of Moms for Shared Parenting is equal rights, equal responsibility. Because so the two narratives that I hear from the single moms that follow me, and then now also this large group of men in the shared parenting movement, they're again different but 100% complementary narratives, which is the men that want more time, more equal time with their kids. They scream that women are the gatekeepers and they keep the children from them. And the women are screaming, I want the dad to show up, but he will not show up and do his share. He will not take on his responsibility. And I believe them both equally. They're both happening equally. And the key to what I just said is equal. If we are going to talk about equal rights, we have to be talking about equal responsibility and vice versa. So when I'm speaking to the men, they're all in their own little bubble of men that have really gotten screwed over by the court system. But looking outside of that, men don't show up. They do not show up and take care of their kids. Speaking to the women, they do keep the kids from their dads. They do it formally through court. They do it in more passive ways in terms of being controlling and hostile to the point the dad doesn't want to show up. I mean, these are both happening. So my message is it has to be equality. If we want equality, you have to be taking equal responsibility for these kids, truly. And that's not easier said than done, right? We can split the time equally, but then who's making the doctor's appointments and shipping the kids to dance in the middle of the afternoon? Like it's more complicated than just splitting the time, but we really do have to take out of the equation that it's societally acceptable for one parent to choose to check out. It can't be. It absolutely can't be. And I'm going to extend this to say that it also, if when we're speaking specifically to the women, if we want equal rights, if we want equal rights to vote, then you got to show up and vote. If you want equal rights to the workplace, you have to stay in the workplace and work and stop treating it like a hobby, right? If you want equal rights, you take equal responsibility, and not just for yourself and your kids, but for all the women around you that are watching you drop out after we've all worked so hard for you to maintain that spot. It is about all of us that we're fighting for. And the same message goes to the dads.
Yeah, I actually that's an incredibly powerful point, I think, for people to hear, because we all talk about what we want, what my rights are. But you're 100% correct. It's really the responsibility. If you are going to argue for those rights, you need to step up. And that comes down to, I've represented moms who are asking for more parenting time, the preponderance of parenting time, and I've represented dads who are, looking for that every other weekend and one night during the week, and they don't show up for the one night during the week because they're working late, and so that goes by the wayside half the time. It truly means, if what you want is equal parenting time and equal shared responsibility, you have to be there for, or be responsible for your parenting time. And I should say that doesn't mean you have to be there. It might mean that you have to have an appropriate caregiver, or you just said schlepping
Yes.
the kids around to their soccer games. It might be an appropriate caregiver taking your children to those
And
games.
you hire that caregiver and manage that caregiver. And this is where we talk about gender equality, right? So there's plenty of science out there that shows that to this day, the majority of people in power are white men, and almost all of them have stay-at-home wives. So they don't give two shits about promoting women, affordable childcare, family leave, flexible schedules. They don't care because they personally never had to deal with that. And I'm going to give them a big pass because that's just human. If we personally don't struggle with an issue, we just don't care about it, right? In your mind, you might care about it. In your heart, you don't, and your actions don't reflect that. But if we are going to have equality, that is really the big, powerful thing about why we need more women in power, because they have felt that pain for decades, for centuries, right? That work-life balance, and trying to figure out if you can go to the board meeting or you have to stay home with a sick kid. If you don't struggle with that, or keep your job or homeschool your kids in a pandemic, if you are personally not figuring that out on a day-to-day basis, you are not going to create better policies for other people. So back to my whole message that single moms and equally shared parenting are going to close the pay gap. When we have dads at every level, I mean, if you are, an hourly worker or you're running a Fortune 50 company, if you have 50% responsibility and you have to figure that out, whether it's stepping out of an important meeting early, canceling a trip, or managing the nanny, like yourself, like really managing it, like really being truly responsible for it. All of a sudden, you are in a totally different paradigm, and you're going to start making very different policies that affect the world. That is how the world is going to change.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I'm thinking about, I had one client who it was a dad, and he was really vociferously arguing for shared equal parenting time, but wanted a clause in the parenting plan that said if the kids were sick and couldn't go to school during his parenting time, or something came up like that, that the mom would take them.
And every mom listening to this, their blood pressure just went through the roof. Call the ambulance. Like, that is the problem right there. You just illustrated exactly what is wrong with this country, really, on a fundamental level. I have no patience for it.
Well, I mean, try being his attorney, right? So here I am. And my job as the attorney is to argue for what he wants. But actually, when I will say, to his credit, so we sat down, and, maybe this is just illustrative for people. We had a conversation about parenting and about being a parent and being there for the children. And it turned out, one of the reasons why he was arguing so much for shared parenting time was because he didn't want to be marginalized in his children's lives. That was a big fear of his, but he didn't see the irony of the fact that even if it was his parenting time, he didn't want the 100% of the responsibility. Much
He
what
wanted
you
the
said.
rights, but not the responsibility.
Exactly, because that's how it had been in the marriage, in the relationship, and he just wanted that benefit to continue. But when it was pointed out to him, and when we discussed it, his mind started to change and to think. And so maybe that's what this episode can do for people. And I don't mean, everyone, just that dads need to rethink things.
No.
Moms need to rethink things too, because in that particular case, by the way, the mother was willing to agree to that clause.
Right. Because that would have given her power.
Right.
She has that much more time. She can always hold that over his head. Well, there's probably a money negotiation in that deal, right?
Oh,
She's
yeah.
probably dependent on his money. And she can always be like, oh, well, I was there. And I've been there holding that thing over his head. And everything you just said, I think, is very human. And it's also very beautiful because you in that conversation are doing God's work. Like you are just showing people their humanity and how flawed it is and how to be better. And this is how we make change. Like I'm out here being a loudmouth and doing my media projects and like getting into policy work and testifying before state legislators, and that's of activism. But activism it happens at home. It really does. And I can tell you, like I talk about this all day long to anyone that will listen, and people in my personal circle, I have won them over, and it's not always easy. The most progressive, feminist people who love me and I love them are not immediately on board, but I break them down. I don't let up. I will tear you
Imagine
down.
that you can.
And I keep hearing success stories. I have like a good girlfriend of mine who grew up in a divorced family. Her dad was a lawyer, the mom was a teacher, like the whole traditional thing. And she didn't buy it. And she's like, you've really changed my tune about this. Now, my girlfriend, her sister's going through a divorce, high conflict, big alimony, blah, 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 blah. And she's on her sister's case singing our tune. She is. And I keep hearing these other divorce stories. But one I heard recently, a girlfriend of mine was kind of being a good friend to her friend going through a divorce. And this friend was fighting tooth and nail for like all the time, all the money. And my girlfriend Penny said, I know you're not happy in your marriage. That's fine. But he's a good guy. Just do 50-50. That's what's fair. And the divorcing friend's like, you are the only person in my life that has said that. Everybody else told me to fight for as much as I could get. And they did. They went 50-50, and that was a couple of years ago, and now they're doing great. That's how we change people's lives. It is a social, we're creating new social norms, and those are so powerful. Again, the science supports that. Whether we're talking about your personal finances, if people that live in debt tend to have friends who are in debt. People who smoke, your teenagers smoking or hanging out with smoking kids, they're going to smoke. Obesity, divorce. Like if one person in your spreading group's getting divorced, right? Peer groups are very important. And if you can start to change that narrative about your friend group and your family and your neighborhood on the playground, this is very powerful.
Yeah. And you said something in there that I want to dive in on as well, because you were talking about 50-50 is what's fair. And I've actually said, really, when we talk about parenting plans, what's fair is we're talking about what's fair for parents. And that's not what parenting plans are about. Parenting plans are about the children, right? Parenting plans aren't for parents. But as you point out, the science and the data point out that shared equal responsibility is best for the children. So if you could just explain that a little bit more, I think that's such a key component, because the first thing I hear from someone who doesn't like this message is it's not what's best for the children.
Well, that's a very popular opinion, and it's wrong.
Science doesn't back it up. Yeah.
It's the science is all there, and I will be happy to send you all the links you can share with your following, because it's very important to focus on the science here. And so the larger picture is that we have a fatherless epidemic in this country. We have tens of millions of children who are growing up without meaningful relationships with their fathers. And the ramifications of this are devastating. If a kid does not have a meaningful relationship with their dad in their lives, they have exponentially higher chance of very important things: mental and physical health issues, incarceration, early sexual activity, STDs in early pregnancies, dropout rates, academic challenges, and then lifetime issues with relationships, employment, and earning. It is an epidemic. It is an epidemic. Why don't we have more engaged fathers? Well, these are families that are separated and divorced families, and the dads systematically are marginalized in their children's lives. It is a sanctioning of marginalizing fathers. And the studies play out. When men are marginalized, they check out. They check out, and you can make all the intellectual arguments you want that they shouldn't, and you wouldn't do that, and you would fight for your kids, and all of those things. But these are human men. These are human beings who love their children, who feel men and women pull equally in terms of having their identities connected to their parenthood. Men today spend more time, just like women. We are this culture of hyper parenting where we're spending exponentially more time with, come on, look at the pandemic. Is that really, really great to spend a lot of time with? It's not. I give you permission. And the science, again, is there. More time is not better. With babies, yes, there is something to be said about attachment parenting and nursing and holding, cuddling babies. After age 2, it does not matter how much time we spend with our kids. And in fact, the financial sacrifices that women make to make that happen is actually more detrimental than what you think is hurting your kids by working. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent.
Oh, but a good
Fatherlessness,
one. But a good
it's a
point.
very important one. I have just
Yeah.
when I read that science, it was a bunch of years ago, and I've written about that so many times. I just I'm freeing you. I am freeing you from these endless, boring, stressful hours of spending with your children. You don't have to do it. It's actually bad for everybody. The kids need more freedom. They need to run around the neighborhood. They need more free range parenting, more doing whatever you want to do. Work, play, moms, go. Everyone needs to go to the gym more. We all need more sleep. Just go do those things and stop hyper-managing your children. So anyways, but we get back to parenting and fathers. And the studies are there when men are marginalized in their children's lives by way of court, almost always they are checking out. They are checking out. And I don't really care whether that's right or wrong, whatever, it is happening. So how do we mitigate this? 50-50 parenting, 50-50 parenting.
So when you say 50-50 parenting, what does that look like? Paint a picture for people.
Well, it can look like really honestly anything you want if you can't come to that decision between yourselves. I mean, I'm sure you've got all the little calendars with the color coded 2255. And I mean, my family, so we didn't have that. I've been divorced for 12 years now. And we had very unequal parenting for many years. It was horrible. I hated it. I mean, I didn't hate it because I wanted 50-50. I hadn't gotten there yet. I hated it because he was flaky. I was doing everything. I was making all the money. I was and I was stressed out, exhausted. I want to get rid of these kids more, right?
Yeah.
And I was probably angry at myself because I'd fought for that majority of time at the beginning. And I just resented it so much. I just so resented it. And we've gradually over the years, we are at 50-50. And for us, my kids are older. They're just turning 11 and 13 this week. So it's like 1 week on, 1 week off. It's easy.
Yeah.
When your kids are littler, people like to do shorter periods, which can make sense. And it can be honestly whatever you want to make it. But it's important also to think about being flexible. Things happen, it's like this week's my daughter's birthday. Her dad wants to see her on her birthday date. Okay, no big deal. Come by or take her out, whatever, being reasonable. There's a pandemic happens. Okay, what does that look like? Thankfully, my ex we agreed very quickly. We live in New York City. My boyfriend has a place out in the mountains in Pennsylvania. So we're it was so scary. He's like, I want to take them out there. He said, that's great. So that was easy, but because we were roughly on the same page, right? People often push back, what about nursing babies? Well, here's the thing. As I think you said this, first of all, our family courts are set up to somehow replicate what was happening when the family was married, assuming they were, which is also, that's not happening anymore. Young people aren't getting married. But okay, well, if we want to replicate that, then we're gonna have two people that hate each other, screaming at each other's blood. We don't want to replicate that. We want something new and better. Something different. We need something different. That's the whole point of being here in the room anyways. So it's not about replicating, it's making better. So again, we're going to equality. And then also it's often whatever that initial agreement is, and it might even be a temporary order, that becomes such a powerful precedent that you are trying to undo for the rest of your parenting if you do want to undo it. It's set legally. A judge may not be open to changing it, which is very common. If somebody is happy with that agreement, the other person is not, that happy person is not going to budge and be flexible because they won. They don't want to give up their winning. So that initial thing. So if I envision a future with me, Susan, where it's just, we have a culture of 50-50. We have laws that support 50-50. Everybody gets it. Everyone's on board with what we're saying. And then we have a couple that are, with young babies and nursing baby, let's say. Well, they might think, well, it's going to be a lower conflict divorce. And that is true. When we have 50-50, it is lower conflict. So maybe they're like, okay, let's just sweat it out for a year or two until these kids get off the boob. Or they do separate and they understand it's going to be 50-50, but in the short term, we understand nursing is wonderful, important. And we're just going to work around that with some flexibility and open hearts and open minds because it's going to be 50-50 and we'll just have a short-term agreement to keep the nursing going. Right. So we are changing our culture, and we have to get off of this idea that everything is this fixed either or, because that's not life. How you feel at the beginning of your divorce, how you feel your kids are little, you'll feel so differently about your schedule. I would love for you to talk about that as the practitioner, how you feel at the beginning of your divorce versus a couple of years in when you want to, you're so frustrated with having the kids all the time, or somebody's job changes or new relationships when you already start dating and you're like, how am I going to hook up if I've got these kids in the house all the time. It's so annoying. Like, it's a problem.
Well, that's actually, and all they have to do, if the people are wondering about this, is go listen to that episode with Molly Hillenbrand. And I swear that's the reason it's so popular, that episode, because she flat out said, I fought for all this time. And then, not even a year later, I was like, what was I doing? Why now? What do I do? How do I? Because there's a difference between being in a household that has two parents that are parenting and can, like, I'm going to go run out to the grocery store, you're in charge of the kids, and now all of a sudden you are the only adult in the household. There's a lot more wear and tear on you, and if you are doing that 24/7 100% of the time, or the vast majority of the time, then your exhaustion just goes up and up and up. And if you have to be on call in case the kids go over to the other parents, but they want to come home early, or you're the only one who can take them to their ballet class or whatever that is, your entire schedule gets structured around your children's schedule, and there's
And
never
you're so
that time.
resentful. And you're so
Yeah, I love that
resentful.
you
The
admit
resentment
that.
is like through the roof, and it stirs up. You can't let go of the old marriage and the divorce, because whatever that resentment is, it's just mirroring those old issues that were happening before. Right?
Yep.
We're trying to create a new life, and we're trying to create new and better parenting habits, right? We want to free women from this sense of duty to be the only parent. And we also need to free men up to be the fathers that we know they can be. And they don't need special training, and they don't need permission. Keeping a baby alive is not that hard. Like, teenagers in developing countries have been doing it forever. It is not rocket science. Right?
Right.
It's a very big part of this is really our, since the divorce boom has been also a boom of like early childhood development psychology science that is lending all these ideas about how to micro engineer the perfect adult. And I think it's playing out to be futile, right? We like all
Yeah.
this overparenting is not serving us, but it plays into all this drama that it can circulate around divorce and separation.
Yeah. And it just plays into the perpetual cycle, as well as it just continues to feed itself, and everybody gets very tied to their role in the family structure. And you mentioned the dad who had, that anyone can keep a baby alive or keep a child alive. I mean, I've had moms argue, well, he's never taken them to the doctor, or he never has fed them dinner or put them to bed. And I've had judges look at people and just go, he can learn, and shame on you that he doesn't know how in the first place. But
Well, shame on you for thinking that's, you're not like a great mom for, letting your kid go to bed. It's a special skill, right? I make fun. Well, I had experience recently, and I was speaking to a group of extremely successful women. And I said all the things that I just said there. So I gave my spiel. I'm like, laid it all out. I'm like, obviously 50-50 is the way to go. All right. I said it. So obviously I changed your mind. I'm done. My work here is done. And then it's time to take questions. Right. And the very first question is like, well, I'm going through a divorce. I hear what you're saying, but he doesn't do a very good job of washing the rinsing the dish soap off of the dishes. So don't you think that I should have the kids the majority of time?
okay.
And I was just like, well, first of all, imagine standing up in front of a judge with your, soon to be ex-husband next to you and saying he's, obviously capable. And I really resent when people are like, he should have the kids because he's a great dad. You don't get the kids because you're a great dad. You get the kids because you're a dad. That is like, it is really a human rights issue that you are fundamentally, you legally in this country, you're presumed to be a fit parent. You do
Right.
not, you should not have to jump through hoops. But I was like, imagine just like the dad standing up there and be like, yeah, I want 50-50. It's like, can't, because one time you didn't do a good job rinsing off dish soap. And two, I really want that mom. And I said to her, I want you to examine why you think you have the authority to make that call. That's the root
Yeah.
of it. Why do you have that authority? And really, I want to free you from that sense of obligation.
Wow. And right there, I think we've just summed up this entire episode, right? It's a great note to end on. So, Emma, how can people find out more, reach out to you? Where would you like them to go to follow up on this? Because this is truly an important conversation, but it's actually important that they play it out.
Sure. So, well, you can find me, let's say, on Twitter at Johnson Emma, Twitter, Johnson Emma. WealthySingleMommy.com is the site, and then also momsforsharedparenting.org.
Okay, well, and I will have all of those in the show notes. I will also have a link to the white paper for the survey. And I also have a wonderful video that you sent me that talks about the Beaver Cleaver generation of parenting that we're still living out in a certain way. So I think it's a great way to get a quick intro to this. So I want to thank you for coming on and for honestly, beyond this, for the hard work that you're doing here and the activist role that you've taken on. It is not always a popular role to take.
Mm-mm.
People do not like change. And this, as we talked about earlier in this episode, really can go to people's core identities and can be very difficult and be received very, um, it can be received poorly. So I appreciate your talking about this. I appreciate the time and energy that you're putting into this because it really is, as you just said, a human rights issue. So thank you for coming on and thank you for the work you're doing.
No, well, thank you. I mean, I feel like we're colleagues in this, so thank you very much.
Absolutely.